Today in the studio, we have our friend Bridgett Blood, who's a grief coach, and she is here to share her journey with the connection codes, of how she learned these tools and now how she utilizes them to process emotions within herself, how she's overcome trauma and processes trauma she's experienced using these tools, and now how she is developing deep friendships using these tools, even living in a brand new city. So that is where we are headed today. And welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tira Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis, who together they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here.
Hello, world.
Hi, friends. We are so excited for today's podcast. We've actually been talking about this for quite some time to have our friend Bridget on, and because we love her, but also she's single. And we love the idea of just being able to really dive into how do you use the Connection Codes tools when you're single. So welcome, Bridget.
Thank you. So glad to be with you guys.
Yes. And we wanted her to kind of tell how she stumbled upon Connection Codes, because that's so much part of her story.
That her last name is Blood. And that's just kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know the history of it, but I'm thinking anybody whose last name is Blood, that's kind of cool.
Thank you.
It is pretty cool. Well, I always tell people that. I say, my name is Bridgett Blood, and I'm like, you'll remember it because of the blood.
Yeah.
So that's great. But yeah, so I found Connection Codes sitting on a coworker's desk a couple years ago, and I've always kind of been in this genre of I love any tool that's going to help us have stronger relationships. And so I was like, this looks interesting. So I picked it up and I wrote it, and I came back and I felt so much shame. And I was like, hey, I ordered you a new copy because I couldn't help but write notes in this.
You wrote in someone else's book?
I did. But I bought him a new one.
Note to self, don't let Bridget borrow your book.
My respect for you just plummeted.
Y'all are missing the point. She bought another book.
I bought another book.
And gave it to the person.
And it was so helpful because it just was a new tool, so simple. I think that was something I think about my mom, that's always a big word for her, is hey, whenever we're using something in our life to help, it needs to be simple, something practical, so that we can remember and actually do it, not read this good book and then go put it on a shelf. And so then probably about a month later, I was in a really serious relationship that ended. And so it kind of rocked my world. It was an incredibly painful season that led to just months and months of really deep pain and trauma and unpacking that. And I would say that the core emotion wheel specifically saved my brain. There was, I had a really, I was in leadership. I love talking about emotional health. So I had a bunch of tools, but I didn't have something that could really help my brain when my body was so traumatized. I literally remember saying my brain is broken. I have whole chunks of memory that are black. I'm waking up with nocturnal panic attacks. My body itches uncontrollably. My body hurts. I cannot think straight. I don't know what to do. And all of the tools that I have, nothing's working. And so it really just became I don't know if I can keep living, so I need to do something different. And so it was starting with a core emotion wheel with a really good friend, 30 times a day.
Wow.
As much as I could, during work, texting, being flooded with fear, even if it's just a quick text message, because I needed to do something. But it just created this capacity in me to go, okay, yes, the whole world did just explode on you. That's okay. And we will become, for me, I always like to use the language of becoming a really kind friend to my body. And I was hey, I refuse to be a leader that doesn't pause, because I think I had watched that so many times in the circles that I was in of people had this really devastating life event, but then it was oh no, can't talk about it. You got to show up on stage, or you need to teach in front of people. You just need to be okay. And I was actually, I'm not okay. And I'm going to try to make my world as quiet as I can to take care of my heart, so that I am the leader that I want to be in 30, 40 years from now. Wow. That was kind of how I started on the Connection Code journey.
Wow, so good. And, I think that, it's such a good reminder, Because I know sometimes we talk with people and we're trying to encourage them to do the wheel once a day, like just for 30 days straight, do it once a day. And yet I think that undersells how powerful it is because you just shared that you were doing it sometimes 30 times a day, believing in how much it really does regulate our bodies and how important it is to get it out. And, we had a check-in with Connection Coders the other night, and that question kind of came back around almost like the idea that you outgrow it or that it's almost like even with people who have been on this journey for a while, they forget how important it is just to use the wheel and to use it for your own self. That's so huge.
Yeah, and some of those people that forget that are Phyllis and Glenn. And it's just amazing to me that, and we always say we're just pilgrims on the journey. We're a little further down the trail than some, but it's always startling to me, and you're better at it than I am, where there's a tense moment or we're stuck on a decision or whatever, and then you'll say, let's do the wheel. And I'm like, the what? No, I don't really say that. But it does. I'm just like, well, wait, I should be, the world's leading, wheeler, and I just forget. It's amazing to me how it just, I don't know. I can't explain it. It just slips my mind. And, part of that's because we walked sideways for so many years. It's just automatic. We jump into the discussion, the conversation. We just forget the connection codes. We forget that, we got to find out what the emotion is behind that. It also amazes me because we've done the wheel literally thousands of times, how helpful it is to have the wheel sitting in front of us. And it's not because we can't remember the 8 words. There's just something about having that director, that, I don't know, that aid, that assistance whenever we're processing through.
Wow. Yeah. It's such a good reminder. So tell us a little more about that, even that idea, because you are single. Yeah. So kind of highlight that as a single person, because so much at times when we are even talking about it, we're talking about it in a marriage relationship. And yet you're saying to do the wheel when you're by yourself.
Yeah, which I want to add to this, not just as a single person, but as an individual,
Right.
because there are so often that people don't think, well, my partner won't do this with me, or I don't have anybody to do this with me. But doing this for yourself makes as much of an impact as it does by co-regulating with someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always have a journal, like I'm a journaler. And so like most days starting that of like, okay, I'm just going to go through the core emotions for myself. For me, I found that because I was having the nocturnal panic attacks, which meant that I would go to sleep at night feeling okay. And then I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like overwhelmed and like physically sick. And so I found that if I could text a best friend before sleep, that was helpful. Or if I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like actually having my brain process, okay, like what's happening for you right now, and not just getting stuck in the I feel sick or I feel flooded or whatever it is. That was super helpful. But I was even thinking about like this morning, like out loud in my apartment by myself, like I had spilt water and I go, oh, pain. Or like, I think that there's this one, it's so funny to me because it kind of it's become a pattern. Like when I throw something down the dish disposal, like food that I didn't eat or whatever, I go, oh, guilt. And I'm like, this has to kind of become the guilt spot because every time it's like, oh, I'm pouring something out and throwing something out. But like even being able to process it is like, I get to experience, like I didn't even know that. I think that's a huge part of my story is I just grew up in a culture where you got small, and especially women got small. And so it was like revolutionizing for me to read connection codes and be like, oh, I actually have the right to take up space. No one had ever told me that before. And so like I think about like even something simple like practicing, because it was so scary for me. Like it was so scary to show up and have needs and process authentically. So like starting small. So like one ways I love to do is like if I order coffee somewhere and it's not right and it's a pain experience for me, I'm flooded with guilt. Of like, ooh, I'm actually experiencing pain. I have joy in taking up space. I have fear in taking up space. Like this is all happening inside of me. And so I was like, you know what? Nope. I remember like the first time I did it, I was at Dunkin' Donuts and I park and I walk in and I was like, hey, I'm feeling some guilt that I'm going to ask to remake this, but I ordered almond milk and this is not almond milk. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And they redid it. And I've done that a couple times now. Some people are snooty about it and they're upset. But if I just show up not defensive of like, oh, you messed up my coffee, and just be like, oh, I'm experiencing pain. I'm feeling some guilt asking because I know you're working so hard. Like even honoring them and what's happening for them.
Wow.
Like all of those things. I think about like literally this morning, I knew that we were going to meet. I had a dentist appointment and it was early. And I was like, oh, I've got some fear. Because what would create a lot of joy for me is if I could move that dentist appointment a little bit later. So I could go from the dentist to here. But then I had fear. I was like, oh, am I allowed to take up that space? And I was like, wait a second. You have the right to exist. You have the right to exist. And so I just was brave and I was like, hey, does it work for you? I'm fine keeping the appointment. And they're like, oh, no problem. Come in at this time.
Wow.
And I was like, great. So it's just all those little things of like, I think number one, starting as an individual, like if you are by yourself or whatever the context is, but even if you're not like again, it's still if you're married, if you're living with people, however the context looks for you, like, is it in a journal? Some people don't like that. Is it a texting it out? For me, that's been very helpful because there's some co-regulation in that of like, hey, I don't need you to respond. That's also, I think, been really helpful in friendships is to say, hey, like, I'm actually not looking from anything from you. I just need to process this. Like I'm walking into a situation and if I don't co-regulate a little bit, I won't know how to process it. So the best that I can do right now is send a text message and you can heart it. And it's just enough identity to go, okay, now my nervous system can settle down.
Yeah, and Dr. Jim Cohn has done so much research about that. What happens when Bridget just conveys it? The person might not even see the text for 3 hours, but it actually makes a difference for you with your nervous system, with your psyche in the moment. And if you actually saw the other person, well, they're in a meeting. They're not, but you don't know that. And so you're just like, oh, my friend is really there for me. Well, sort of they're not, but you don't know that. And just the processing of it. And what's so fascinating, startling to me is that we are all born this way. 100% of babies on the planet are born being authentic. We're supposed to be. We're hardwired for this. I'm faith-based. I believe God designed it. Even if there's no God and it's evolutionary, still, this is the human condition. And that virtually all of us, as far as I know, get knocked off course. And then we get lost. And now I show up as a 10-year-old, a 15, 20, 30-year-old, inauthentic. And now I don't like the coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm not allowed to say, something wrong with it. This is not what I ordered. And I'm gracious a lot, but how many times Phyllis and I had conflicts over the years because I would want her to go up to Dunkin' Donuts to, get my coffee fix. And of course, this poor girl was kind and adored me, and she would do it. But she actually enabled me and facilitated my not being authentic, my not being present. And I would just always, shove it on her. There was a lot of guilt and shame that I did that to her thousands and thousands of times. And I just didn't have it within me to be like, wait, no, this is my experience, this is my need. So I will convey it. Now I have to tell on you, Bridget, because I'm rarely thrown by people using the connection codes because this is how we breathe and what we do. So we're at a party, and we spend a lot of time with Bridget because we adore her. She's one of our extra daughters. And we're at this party, and I made you a drink, and I put a little bit of effort into this, and I was very proud of myself. There's a lot of joy. And I handed it to you, and you took one sip, and you said, oh, sad. And I go, and I forgot the connection codes. I'm like, what? And you go, yeah, that's just a pain experience. And I'm like, no, what? And I'm thinking, and you and I are pretty close, so it's okay. But I'm like, no, Bridget, you go outside and you throw it in the fire or something. You don't just say it in the moment. And you said, well, but it's a pain experience. It's not a joy experience. I'm like, no, this is not how humans function. And of course, I was giving you grief. But it was just so beautiful. And I in the moment, I said, I feel some hurt. And you're like, yeah, I get that. And we processed that through, I think, in 25 seconds. And I'm just watching this, and that has stuck with me. I've told that story so many times since then. I'm like, oh, what if everybody operated that way? Will I feel pain? Will I feel hurt that you rejected my drink? Maybe. Okay, and then I'll process that with you, and we're 25 seconds into the interaction, and we're actually more bonded afterwards because, and the corollary is now I know Bridget's just going to tell me. So when I miss something with her, and again, it wasn't that I was doing something evil or wrong. I just, the drink I handed you didn't like. But just to know that I can be safe with her because she'll tell me. I don't have to wonder. And I think most relationships struggle so much because they just don't know.
Yeah.
And Bridget may be totally authentic with me, but I don't know that she is. And so now I get lost, and I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, is she pissed about something? You know, is she mad at me? And they just drown in the not knowing.
I think that's a really great, beautiful point that I've not thought about very much. Is just the safety that it brings in your relationships and in your friendships whenever you both do process together. Because I have experienced so many times in life where, and a part of it is my personality type. I have so much shame. I touch shame the closest. And to have fear of what other people would say about me, you know, is really damaging to me. But to have a friendship where you're just telling each other right there in the moment, so there's not the fear of, well, they're going behind my back and saying, well, Glenn's a horrible drink maker, you know, like he's just awful at this, or, well, Bridget destroyed my book, you know, instead of just being able to say in the moment, oh, that's pain, or that's hurt, or that's fear. It opens you up to a safety that I hadn't really thought about.
Which again, that's how we're coded. That's how we're hardwired from birth. And then we get reprogrammed. We never get recoded. It's still inside of us. We just got knocked off course. So good.
That is really good.
I think for me, just even talking about building friendships. So I just moved to Nashville 6 months ago. Yesterday was my 6-month anniversary. Cool. So exciting. And it's been, well, what a gift it's been to move and start a new season of life with the connection codes. I acknowledge that, like, that is a huge gift to start friendships. Like, it's just amazing to me. Like, you know, the company I'm part of, you know, they're connection coders. And so even having a boss that's a connection coder is incredible, and the safety that's created in the workplace. But I think about in building friendships, for me, it's been so triggering to show up authentically, because I was taught, I think I got mixed messages about this whole idea of emotional boundaries in relationships. And so the way that I interpreted that teaching was, you have to wait until a certain magical line until you're allowed to be authentic. And so I was experiencing a lot of pain in relationships, or tolerating a lot of pain in relationships, because I wasn't being authentic of what was happening for me. And so I know, like, one of the questions that I cried through with you, Glenn, in the beginning was like, so does that mean I take my stunt double on the first date? Like, do I actually gear up to be inauthentic? And so learning, actually, I can show up into a first date, or to a friendship, or to a workplace environment, or in the grocery store, or at the coffee shop, wherever it is, like, I can show up authentic. And it's okay that there are some people that don't want the authentic version of Bridget. And I think that was a really painful learning experience, but I think I had developed so many relationships in my life out of convenience, not out of people that actually wanted the authentic version of me. And so when I stopped hiding, that did lead to a break in relationship, and that there's devastating in that. And so being able to process. And so I think about like showing up now super authentic from the beginning. And, you know, I'd love to share a funny story about that, but there is pain in it. I do want to acknowledge that like, it's not like this is some magical thing where you share the core emotion wheel one time with someone and your relationship is perfect. It's just an invitation to connection over and over and over again, even if the pain point needs to be processed 4,000 times. Like, for some people's brains, you might hit a pain point and it's like, okay, great. Like, we're ready to move on in 30 seconds. For another person, like, I think about this week specifically, I've had like one pain point I've had to process for 4 days. And today, on the 4th day, I finally felt like my body caught up and of like, okay, I've processed it. I've probably had to process that 15 times to feel like my body actually got to a place where I followed the energy all the way through.
You know, it is interesting. I think we miss on ourselves so often. Like, even in teaching it, we say, you know, follow the energy all the way through, but we don't realize that applies to us as well. Like, personally, individually. And I think it's, such a great reminder that we've got to use these tools for ourselves as an individual, not just as a marriage tool or, you know, but to realize, wow, like, I deserve this and I need this. And I think we're often bombarded with painful things, and to realize it can be just as an individual, I need to use these tools and follow my own energy all the way out is really such a good reminder.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love, and I feel shame that I can't even quote you, Tira. I've only heard you say it a few hundred times. What do you say at the beginning that in our relationships and in ourselves? But what's before that? I should know this. You should know.
Where we teach you to process your emotions to help you connect with others
And yourself.
and in yourself.
Okay, you're worse than me. You're the one that actually said
I'm not in the moment.
anyway, but I love it that you say in ourselves, because we do forget that, and also those that know the Connection Coach story, this grew out of my marriage therapy practice, and so I remember and I always say I'm the educated one, Phyllis is the smart one. I remember the first time, and Phyllis had been talking with Echo, and then Phyllis said to me, "This isn't just about marriage. This is about all relationships." And then I was like, wait, what? No. And then Echo got in on it, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, this is amazing." With the kids, I'm like, no, not with those short people. That this can't possibly work. And I just had no idea that this was just the human. And of course, over the ensuing weeks and months, we're like, oh, well, dang, this is, wow, really, really powerful. To realize, this is just, and then as it even evolves more and realize, this is with myself. We say to people, go to Amazon.com, get the extra large box of ooze, so that you have them for yourself as well, and you're following your own energy. You're going, what's happening with me? What am I missing? What's happening? And you find yourself, which is just remarkable.
It's amazing to me. I actually had a dream, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, where I was talking to the little version of Bridget, and I oohed her. And she just processed, it was so powerful. Wow. I feel like that's been happening a lot lately. I've been in a season of some intense coaching work for my own story of pain. And so it was just been so cool of having so much practice in real life to even while I sleep, my subconscious waking up and saying no, you're worth being regarded. And I think for me, one of the biggest places of resistance is with rest. And so to start listening of because I can feel it. I feel it's your body is so exhausted. I know that if I go sit down for 10 minutes, I will be out cold. And so I'm learning to be hey, everything in culture says push, keep going. Here's a deadline. Right. Here's a meeting. Here's whatever. And I'm my body is begging me, please don't push any further. And I'm responsible for following that energy. So to say, okay, the hard choice is to text and say, hey, I know we had coffee scheduled, or I know we had this meeting scheduled. I'm not able to show up because I think there's one of the biggest places of ownership, I feel in this whole journey for me, has been changing the narrative from me showing up authentically is hurtful to others. Because if I say, oh, Tira, something you said hurt me, right? The alternative is me not saying that to you, and then I build resentment. And then I break our relationship. Yeah. So the most honoring thing that I can do is to say, oh, there's some pain here, or there's some hurt here, to create and build that trust. And so for me, I've really just tried to be okay, if I'm going to be a person of honor that I say I want to be, that means that I have to show up with a real story, even if that story has some pain in it. And then I'll know, okay, does this person want to show up for me? Do they want to match me in this, or do they not? And I want to know that soon. So we kind of joke about, I've been processing what I'm calling my parking garage fear.
I love this story. I hope you're going to tell it.
I didn't know that I had a parking garage fear until I'm in Nashville and have lots of opportunities for parking garages. And so I think back in my story, I have had experiences with violence outside of cars. One when I was about 6 or 7, one at about 19, and then again at 25. And so I just moved from small town Ohio, and so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be in situations that were kind of triggering to that core fear. Then I moved to Nashville, and I'm in situations where I'm parking in new places in the dark in parking garages. And so I had met a brand new friend, and she and I were going to go to a concert, and I get to the parking garage, and I go to open the door, and I go, I can't get out of the car. And so again, I'm trying to follow my own energy. I'm okay, what do you need? Because everything inside of me that I've learned is so flooded in shame that says, if you're going to be this authentic with her this early, she will not be friends with you. And so I'm like, okay, I'm trying to like fight this inside of like, okay, do I get small and do I just fake it till I make it and hurt the relationship? Or do I honor my body? Do I honor the energy here? Do I honor this person and say, actually, this is what I need? So I called her and I was like, hey, I have lots of fear sharing this with you. You might think I'm psycho. I need you to come park right next to me in this parking garage. Will you do that, please?
Wow.
And she was like, I'd be happy to. And so she came. And so I called a friend on the phone who I had already had a relationship with that knew the connection codes. And I'm like, hey, I need to do a feeling wheel with you. I'm in the car, panicked. I can't get out of the car. And so I'm going through my core emotions. This is what's happening for me. New friend shows up. We get out of the car. Literally, it was like 6 steps to a door that opened. And then the event venue was like a little bit across the road. But I'm so grateful that I paused because I had so much fun that night that I would have robbed myself of that joy if I wouldn't have processed, because my nervous system would have been so stuck trying to process through the fear that I dishonored or didn't follow, that then I was able to show up and be really like brave in that. And so that kind of started it, which was so cool to me. But then it started to get sticky because it kept happening again. And it's like, I remember we were out for dinner and I was like, hey, and there was a group of women. I was like, this is a really big pain point for me. I need people in this. I might call you, or if we go out somewhere, like it's going to create a lot of safety for me to know what the parking is going to be like before I get there. And just kind of showing up in that space, but having to process it multiple times and just it being okay to being able to get to the point. I mean, I probably had to do this 20 times with new people. Of like, oh, this is a pain experience for me, and being able to process it. And I was flooded with shame every time. And it was so cool. I think one of the last times it happened, I was fine going in because it was bright out still. But when we left dinner, it was dark. And I was like, well, will you walk me to my car? And I was with my friend and they walked me to my car. And I got to the car and I was like, actually, I think I'm okay. I don't know that I need them to walk me next time. But it was because I followed it all the way through. Which again, it's not some magic remedy where I don't have permission for it to show up again, because 2 days ago, I was in the situation again and I felt all the fears pop up in me with a person that I've processed 20 other times with. And I'm like, okay, am I going to show up authentic, or am I going to hide again? And so I'm like, hey, feeling some guilt. I know we've processed this 1,000 times. I'm feeling fear that, and I said, I don't even need anything from you. I just needed to process that. And they were able to say, okay, here's the details of what's going to happen. Here's what you're showing up to. And I just was like, thank you so much. Thank you for showing up in my fear. And I'm ready to like move on now from it. But that's just been so important to me, of just really strengthening my friendship with myself, that even if no one shows up, which so many people have shown up, but like even if no one else wants to show up for me in processing emotions, like I will be a really kind friend to myself, that I will be the kindest, like having the ooh to myself, even if no one else chooses to, which is a hard, powerful place to be.
Yeah. Have you found that in those friendships that they break down vulnerability to you more quickly than relationships in the past?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been so great just even practicing together, because I think there's the biggest resistance you'll get is when you start sharing I don't want you to feel that. I don't want you to feel shame. You don't need to be afraid. And actually kind of learning together of, hey, I've been doing some learning recently. I found this awesome tool called the connection codes. And so when I'm sharing with you, it's just information to let us kind of both know what's happening. I'd love to hear what's happening on your side. Has definitely strengthened those relationships. And there have been people that have chosen not to show up like that.
Yeah.
And again, I think I want to mention that part of it, because it's okay that some people choose not to show up for whatever reason, as it doesn't even have to be personal about you. But holding the tension of when we are vulnerable, it does create safety for other people to show up in vulnerability. And it strengthens a relationship.
And I think that's the majority of people. Once they see your vulnerability, they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can be vulnerable too. But if they're not, I would rather you find that, in this conversation you and I have had a few times, I'd rather you find that out in 20 minutes or a couple of hours or a day or two, not 3.5 years of your life that you devote to this person. And whether it's a dating relationship or whatever, and I've shared a lot of times that I was close to 50 when Phyllis first said to me, babe, why do you pursue relationships with people that don't want a relationship with you? And I was aghast that I was married to this evil woman. And I was like, well, that's what we're supposed to do. You know, we're followers of Jesus. We love God, and that's what we're supposed to do. She said, no, not at all. And that has revolutionized everything for me. I'm startled. And I'm not allowed to go keep someone's car because they're not safe for me. Yeah. But I would rather find that out. And it's still painful, just like you said, that's important that it's not, la la land, that everything's magical. It's still painful, but at least then you know. And now this person is not going to be there for me, is not going to be safe for me. They don't think that I'm good enough for them. Whew, thank goodness they let me know that. Now I cannot expend all my time and energy that I was going to. Now I'll just go hang out with people who are kind to me, which is what we are designed to do anyway. Remarkable.
Yeah, I love that. And that, because I'm also new to the area, moved here just a few months before you did. And so finding new friendships has been terrifying for me. And also, I often feel like an outlier for the area that we move into because my views are not always the same as everyone else's about different topics. And so it's been tricky to navigate meeting new people because I want to be vulnerable quickly with them, but I also don't want to be rejected by every single human that I meet. And so I was introduced to a friend from Glenn and Phyllis. So she's a fellow connection coder. And I've probably hung out with her, 6 times at this point, and mostly in groups. And this week, she is someone who got vulnerable with me very quickly. And I was like, oh, wow, this is different. This is refreshing. And so our first time ever hanging out one-on-one, I was like, listen, I need you to know right now who I am because I don't want to get attached to you. Yeah. And then you find out that I believe all of these things and then you reject me later. And so even 2 days ago, she and I had lunch together. She said, I want to invite a new friend, for you to meet because I think that you will align. And I sat there with these 2 women, one of which I hung out 6 times with, the other who I'd met 20 minutes earlier. And because of the first woman's vulnerability and safe space for me, we sat there and talked about gun control. We talked about intimate details of sex. I told those women's secrets that I've only told one of my best friends. I went deeper with those 2 people than I have been with the majority of my friends. And it was because the first one was vulnerable enough to share with me, and she created safe space for me to be myself. And so I just think that is so beautiful and incredible. And but I want to acknowledge that it does kind of sound easier than it is because I still have fear of, if my next door neighbors find out really who I am, are they going to reject me? And so there is a lot of pain in vulnerability for sure. But once you get over that hump, then you can find those authentic relationships that are deeper than you could imagine. Yeah. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I know even like the first time we had coffee that you brought that up. And I just think it's so great because I feel so honored to go slow. Like I feel so honored in our friendship to be able to go, okay, hey, like this is a real big pain point for Tira. And to say, okay, like it's an honor to hold your heart in that because I know there's so many things and like the parking, right?
Right.
That's a pain point for me. So for me to be able to show up and say, hey, this is what I need. It feels so good. And I think like I love being able to care for you in friendship that way. In the same way I've watched you guys, show up for friendship for me, that we want to do that. And I think it's a gift that we offer, which is so vulnerable because it is okay. Like it's okay that it's scary. It's okay that it feels like so flooding and so overwhelming to show up because most of us have spent our lives so inauthentic, or we've shown up in what's the word I'm looking for? We've showed up in authenticity. Correct?
Can you say with?
Glenn is the word guy.
We showed up with authenticity.
Phyllis and I say everything wrong, and he always tells us.
And we've been abandoned or we've been rejected or whatever it is. And so it's a pain experience. And so that's okay. And so, I just think it's a great a great tool to be able to say, hey, like I'm going to show up for me and I'm going to show up in relationships, and it creates a whole new level of intimacy and depth that wouldn't have been there if we didn't risk being real.
For sure. Cool. And that creates a better you, and it creates a better, like, your other relationships. Because, like, I left lunch with those two women as a better wife. Truly. Like, I was inspired to go home and, like, see my husband and love my husband well, because I had spent time with two women that were vulnerable with me. And so, in the same, for if it's whether it's a business situation or just wanting to, like, grow yourself, when you surround yourself with other people, they're going to speak life into you and hold space for you, and that you can share authentically with, it is just going to amplify your life tremendously. But it takes vulnerability to get there, and that's not always easy immediately.
Yeah, and that's something that culturally we've said is that, these relationships take a long time to develop. And most people believe that, especially in our faith-based spaces, that, you need to be there for 5 years. Who knows? Nobody even knows the equation on it. And what I've said for many years that has not always gone over well with church leadership is it doesn't take time to develop relationships of depth. It takes depth to develop relationships of depth. And exactly what you're talking about, Tyre, that you just met this woman. Well, Tyre, it's going to take several years, and then you'll be able to connect with her.
Yeah.
Then you'll be able to be open and vulnerable. No, the stage was set for the other person was authentic, and then you just lean into it. And if this person wasn't safe, and again, there'll still be pain in it, but I'd rather you find that out quickly.
Right.
So now you're not pursuing this relationship for 3 years, and then you find out this person is never going to be there for me. So now I just invested 3 years into this relationship.
I'm thinking about this just on different levels as far as for our listeners, because I'm kind of going through a catalog of my friends, because there are certain friend groups that I've had for a really long time, like pre-connection codes. And when I step back into that space, it is so obvious to me the lack of depth, the lack of vulnerability. And I have taken, like, one time it was actually on just a girls' weekend getaway, and I took the core emotion wheel and I put it on the table, and I asked them to join me in that. And these are women I've known for many years, and they panicked, and some of them were like, and I thought, oh wow, that's really sad. That means we're not safe. We've invested all these years in these friendships, and we don't feel safe with each other. And I knew I had to start, which is, if you're kind of relating to this, I would encourage you've got to start. So I started, and I did the whole wheel, and I was very raw, transparent, because I knew the more I was vulnerable, the more chance of them being there and getting there. And ended up that everybody did it. But for some, you could just see the pain of sharing, honestly. And yet, again, that was only one time. And how beautiful if that had been like, and it took, I had fear even suggesting it. Because I felt the energy shift. I felt they're going to resist this. And I think my sadness in it was, I wish I had started there when we first got there, and then had the opportunity to do it multiple times before I left for the weekend. And I think, though, if you're new to connection codes, or you're just learning these tools, it is, because of kind of what I'm hearing, like, you just moved here, you just are sharing it from I'm new in town. So these are new relationships, and I'm wanting to show up authentically. And yes, there's times even that it's painful, because you kind of get that. Some people are okay with it. Some are like, no, thank you. But it is an extra challenge, an extra layer when you're trying to bring this into a friend group that you've had for a super long time. And you feel fear, or at least I did, in bringing it out. And yet, from that group, there are some who've stepped over into this space and want to use these tools and are using these tools. And so then it has really taken our friendship to a really beautiful level. And I feel super safe with a few of them. And so I think, though, in realizing these tools will really shine, it's almost like it spotlights these friendships that you maybe have had for decades may not be that safe. But you got to make space. That's the beauty. Like when you spotlight friendships and you realize, wow, as hard and painful as it is, realizing, you know what, I that isn't safe. It's okay to go, I need to go find some friendships that are. I deserve that. I need that. And then, but you got to make space. It's like you got to first find out the truth in this friendship to be able to go and start new friendships. Because we're all limited in how much time we have, just how much energy we have to nurture friendships. Yeah. And so, I think especially for our listeners who are like, I've lived in this town for this, for a long time. My friends are, my acquaintances' friends are all the same. There's nobody new coming in. So then what do we do? Well, the tool is a powerful tool, and you can do it with strangers, right? Like that's a really cool experience when you do it with someone for the first time who y'all don't know each other. That can be a really powerful experience, but it's also to take it into friendships that you've had for a long time. It really can either take your friendships to an incredible level, and all of a sudden you realize we can do this. Like you're safe for me and I'm safe for you. Or you learn that, wow, I'm not safe with y'all, no matter how many decades we've been friends. And
I think one of the things I always love to encourage people, whether that's friends or clients or however that works out, of being like, hey, when you're creating a new dynamic for a relationship, I think there's two things. Number one, create that space to grieve the shift in the dynamic. And number two, like communicate your intention. Like I have so much joy having you in my life, and I want to have a friendship that feels so safe for both of us. I've learned these new tools that have been really helpful for me to connect with myself or in my marriage or in my friendships. Is this something that you want to try? And like honor that compared to the like, our friendship is broken, we don't have any trust, let's go do this tool. Like that's immediately going to shut someone down. So I've learned even changing the language. I think I especially encourage couples to do this, but I think this works in all areas, is like communicate the intention. Like my intention is I love you. I want to create safety with you. I want to connect with you. I found some things that have been helpful for me. Do you want to try that? And that just kind of melts people a little bit compared to the like opposite. So I just found that like that, using that specific phrasing of like, I have joy having you in my life. I want to have a safe relationship with you. That's just kind of helped the change, because it is hard. I mean, I think about, all the relationships. It's not like my world's in a bubble now where I only have relationships that have existed for 6 months. I have family and friends I've known for decades. And so creating that space to relearn some things and heal some places where I've contributed to brokenness in our relationship.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Dr. Glenn talks a lot about, because we'll have a lot of husbands or wives message in or partners and say, hey, I want this, but my partner won't. How do I convince them to do it? And like approaching someone and being like, I love you and I care about you and I want to do this with you so we can grow together, is such a different shift in the dynamic and how the reaction can play out.
And especially when you can use the third phrase and to say to somebody, I think I've missed some stuff. I didn't mean to. I think I just really missed some things with you. These are the things I think I've missed. What else has happened for you that I've missed?
Yeah, wow.
And what an incredible, and again, not just non-threatening, it's so pleading, it's so inviting to get them to be able to convey, because it's true for everybody. I mean, I've missed in every relationship ever. We all have, and just to have that opportunity, especially parents with adult children, that's a really big thing.
Right. Okay, we end our podcast every single week with our core emotion wheel, and so if this is your first time listening, well, you've probably been pretty confused of like, what have they been talking about this whole time? Our core emotion wheel is the tool that we use to teach you how to identify the emotions firing within your body. And it gives you the opportunity to connect with not only yourself, but with a friend or with your partner, with your team. And so we end every single episode going through, there are very specific rules to how you can use this correctly so it doesn't create more damage. And you can find those on our website, connectioncodes.co/podcast. And you can download a copy of this tool, a video of Glenn and Phyllis doing the tool, as well as the outline of how to do it appropriately. So Bridget, you going to do it today?
Well, I am feeling a little bit of fear, so you're going to have to partner with me because we don't have a wheel.
I know.
I have one in my fridge.
Wait, do we have one?
No.
I took it off. I feel some guilt. I took it off the other day and gave it away.
Wow, did you really?
I did. I think I can do it. I just might need some help.
We'll get that.
Okay. There is some lonely for me in the connection code world. As a single person, I think I feel some guilt in that too, because I know behind the scenes that you guys have done an incredible job creating connection codes as a place for all people in all ages and stages of life. So just continuing to learn how to navigate that and process that with you. What does that look like for me as an unpartnered person? For now, there's some sadness today in the weather. I wish it was sunshine and beautiful. I could have lunch outside. Shame. There's some shame just for how I've shown up in relationships before connection codes. I know that without having these tools that I've just contributed to some dynamics that have hurt others. And so I just, make space for that on both sides. Hurt. I think there's hurt for, there's hurt in places where I show up. I think there's hurt in dating. There we go. There's like hurt in dating of places where I've shown up authentically and to have guys say, oh, actually, that's not what I want. And I honor them, and that's so great that that's their choice. But there's just a hurt. There's hurt in that of, ooh, ouch, and kind of having that repeat. Where are we at? Fear. I think there's fear that in being so authentic, will there be a dude that wants to choose me forever? I think with that, there's also joy, because I think I can hold space for both. That there's lots of joy, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be where I'm at in this season of life, to build a lot of self-trust, to build trust in friendships and business and family, that I'm so excited to be able to show up with Connection Codes tool from the very first date. Like that is so, I have so much joy thinking about that. Like just, and I think I've said this to you guys privately, but like just so grateful like for the way that you guys have shared your story so publicly. Like there's something deep within me and like my desire to carry like legacy of connection codes of like, look what all of you guys have fought for in your own homes, in your own families. Like there's something inside of me that goes like, I cannot let all that hard work go to waste. Like I'm just so grateful that I have the opportunity to show up on a first date with connection codes because of the 30 years of struggle that you guys have contributed to. So I feel lots of joy in that.
Anger and guilt.
Anger and guilt. Angry. I'm angry that I was taught messages that emotional boundaries meant, or at least the way I interpreted, stay small. That was somehow the honoring thing or the pure thing to do in relationship. Guilt. I think I have guilt as someone that has served in leadership at a church, that I've contributed to messages that have harmed people's relationships and have wounded their ability to connect with their emotions. Grateful for the opportunity to heal that, but I think there's some guilt in that too.
Wow.
Get that.
So good.
That's amazing.
So good. Thank you so much for sharing and for being here and joining in this conversation about friendship and about processing for yourself, with yourself, and then how to reach out to other people to process with them. Is just so impactful for everyone, myself included. And I want everyone to hear that like you are worthy of safe relationships.
Yes.
and friendships. And I think so many of us have experienced so much pain in friendship.
Yep.
Whether it was through rejection or down the road, just trust being broken. A lot of pain is there. And I also want to say, especially to men, because I do think that women can be faster to getting vulnerable with other females and friendships. And we have a lot of pain in it. And I think some men have avoided some of that pain because they don't go as deep as quickly. And so there's just like a lot of surface level. And I just want men to hear, like, you are worthy of deep and vulnerable relationships with other men. So you can share life and not carry everything by yourself. And if you are curious about, like, what all are they talking about? I need more information. Again, you can start with downloading our will for free at connectioncodes.co/podcast, or you can just dive right in if you're like, me and my partner need this tool. And we need it not only for our relationship, but for ourselves and for our friendships. Go to connectioncodes.co/foundations course. And that is our beginner's course for processing and learning how to identify your emotions. And as Bridget mentioned, we have an incredible book that is worth getting a highlighter for and a pen and mark it up completely. And just go ahead and buy one for your friend, because they'll ask to borrow it and then they'll mark it up and ruin your book.
There you go.
Just start with 2 now. And so we do all of this and we share all of this because
you need this.
You deserve this.
So
let's do this.
Let's do this.